Welcome back everybody to another MOTOBOB video. Now the main motorcycle shows for the year are over, and so that means we've got a pretty good idea of what the new bikes will be available on the market for 2024. So here we go with the best new and updated nakeds, and we'll go in price order ascending, and the top bike on this list gets pretty flipping expensive. So starting us off at just under 5 grand, we've got the cheeky little new single cylinder Speed 400 from Triumph. And this is a big deal for them. It allows them to move into the high volume Asian markets where smaller capacity bikes like this are super popular. But also the good news for bikers in Europe and the rest of the world is that there's now a great new option on the market for newer riders, anyone on a budget, anyone looking for a smaller or lighter bike, and also perhaps as a great option for a good looking second bike. Now the initial launch price on this one looks super impressive. It looks very good versus similar bikes on the market, and they've partly achieved that by having it built out in India by their new partners Bajaj. Thing is though, I've got to say, having seen it up close, despite that aggressive price point, the standard of finish and care put into the details is right up there with what you'd expect from a Triumph. There's a really nice feel to the hardware, the paint looks decent as well, and also the styling is absolutely spot on. They've given it a bit of that classic Bonneville kind of look. Don't be fooled though by the slightly old school appearance, because it's also looking pretty good on performance. You're getting just shy of 40 horsepower peak from the 398cc single. There's 37.5 Newton meters of peak torque, a 43mm upside down big piston fork, and a radially mounted 4-pot brake up front courtesy of Bybrake. And that's all in a fairly slim package at just 170 kilograms wet, so I'm certainly looking forward to taking one of these for a spin. Now it looks like it'll make decent competition for one of the proven small to mid capacity nakeds on the market, and that's the KTM 390 Duke. This one comes in about 700 quid more, but it's also built in India by Bajaj, and so it's not a million miles off the Triumph. That said, it does have a much more modern appearance, and so I think it'll probably appeal more so to anyone who likes the sort of sportier side of biking. Updates for 2024 include a boost in capacity, which has given it an extra horsepower, so that's a new peak power figure of 44 horses, and that's probably also aided by the new airbox design and also the completely redesigned exhaust system. There's also a change to the steel trellis frame and a new aluminium subframe. The suspension gets reworked with more adjustability, the wheel design is new, and there's also bigger brake discs. And on top of all that, you've got a 5-inch color TFT display now, through which you can manage some riding modes, cornering traction control, launch control, and some connectivity over Bluetooth with your phone. So it looks pretty impressive to me, and it's a lot of features and spec for just over 5.5 grand. Now one of the other options on the more modern looking side is the new Kawasaki Z500, which is essentially the 2024 update of last year's Z400. With this one you get a parallel twin which has been bumped up to 451cc in capacity, although realistically out on the road it actually makes similar power to the KTM and only a smidge more torque. Still, it looks like a decent overall package, nice and light at around 172 kilograms curb, and there's also an up-spec'd SE version which gets a TFT display instead of the LCD dash of the base model. Then you've also got the Honda CB500 to consider, which now bears the HORNET name to pull it in line with its super successful bigger sibling, the CB750 Hornet. Now the CB500 has been in their lineup for some time, but this new 2024 version gets some tweaks to the engine, like new fuel injection settings and new traction control, a new TFT display, and also a new styling package. Now the LED lighting is a big part of that. It really does give it a different look at the front end with a new stack design, and this is becoming an increasingly popular design decision at the moment, not just from Honda but across all bikes it seems. And I think from the comments on the channel it's not necessarily to everyone's taste, so let me know what you think of this bike in terms of the looks down in the comments. Personally I think I actually quite like it, but the main disadvantage of this bike versus the competition we just mentioned absolutely has to be the curb weight, which is tipping the scales at 188 kilograms. That's getting on for nearly 20 kilos more than the rest, but at 6,199 pounds and with the Honda name and build behind it, it's still probably one to test ride before you pull the trigger on one of the others. So that's the smaller capacity bikes, but if it all sounds a bit archaic to you, then you might want to consider one of Kawasaki's 2 new offerings, which are firmly at the more modern end of the motorcycle spectrum. The ZE1 is their new electric naked, whereas the Z7 Hybrid uses a battery and motor in conjunction with a parallel twin that's similar to that found in the Z500. Now, to be clear, these bikes aren't really designed to replace your traditional petrol bike. The range figures specifically for the electric are still pretty limited, and so it's really a commuter where you know that you're traveling a set distance every day, or potentially a dedicated city bike. But still, you've got to say hats off to Kawasaki for being the first major manufacturer to get an electric on the market, and also the hybrid, it has to be said, is an impressive technical feat. Performance-wise, you're looking at 125 type figures from the electric with about 10 horsepower peak, although the hybrid, they're saying, can actually deliver 1000cc supersport levels of acceleration from a standstill, despite 250cc levels of fuel economy. Certainly sounds very impressive, although the bad news is that you'll definitely have to pay for it. While the electric comes in at £7,699, which isn't too bad, the price on the hybrid is TBC, but expectations have been set around the £12,000 mark. Now, before we get on to the next one, I just want to say a massive thanks to today's video sponsor, and that's Manscaped. As a bearded man myself, it's with great joy that I bring you Manscaped's first ever beard trimmer, the Beard Hedger Pro, and this thing is serious. It's got a 7,200 RPM motor and titanium coated blades, so it can cut through those wiry beard hairs with absolutely no problem. Also, with one guard, you've actually got 20 different cutting lengths, which you can easily cycle through with the zoom wheel, and so whether you want short stubble or a great big bushy beard, the Beard Hedger Pro has you absolutely covered. Plus, they offer it as part of their awesome Beard Hedger Pro kit, which contains the absolute works for keeping your facial fuzz in fine fettle. So there's beard shampoo, beard conditioner, beard oil, and beard balm. Then you've got the travel case and some free gifts, including the beard brush, beard comb, but also some precision beard scissors in case you fancy trying your hand at some freestyle artistic whisker-based topiary. Now, on top of all that, if you do head to the link in the description and use the code MOTOBOB, you'll get 20% off and free international shipping, which it has to be said is a heck of a deal. So do check them out down in the description below, and once again, a massive thanks to Manscaped for their support. Now, another technical innovation for 2024 comes from Honda, with their updated 650 bikes now being available with their e-clutch system. This one is the CB650R Naked, and it's still powered by their 650 inline 4 that makes a little over 90 horsepower, and it also gets some updates for the new model year, including improved styling and a TFT dash. So a decent prospect in its own right, but the e-clutch option does add a new dimension, and it makes the bike operable without having to use the clutch lever if you so wish. It's going to give you a sort of twist and go riding experience, so you don't need the clutch to set off or stop, and nor do you need it to shift up and down the gearbox. Thing is though, if you do want to take control, the clutch lever still works as normal, and it'll actually momentarily disable the e-clutch, so you can still use it if you want to slip the clutch to ride slowly, for example. Certainly sounds really interesting to me. I can't wait to take it for a spin. Ideal, I reckon, for stop-start traffic. And the other good thing is it only adds a couple of kilograms to the total weight, as opposed to the 10 kilograms or so of the automatic DCT system. Now, no exact price yet for the e-clutch version, but the regular analog clutch bike will be £7,799, so expect a few £100 more than that. Now, next up, we've got one of my favorite naked bikes on the market, and that's the Yamaha MT-09. Thing is, it's not really my usual thing in terms of looks, but for 10 grand, you don't get much more fun than this. The key factor is the CP3 inline triple engine, which has loads of guts in the mid-range, and it also tops out at just shy of 120 horsepower, so it's perfect for fast road riding, and it also brings a super addictive soundtrack when you're on the throttle. The only drawbacks for me previously would have been the small TFT display, the slightly unusual riding position, and also the slightly unusual styling. But the new 2024 model addresses all of these points with a bigger TFT display, lower handlebars for a more typical naked bike stance, and also a redesign to the headlight and bodywork, which I think are going to be a little bit more broadly palatable. I mean, it is still very modern looking, and so perhaps not for everyone, but fundamentally this is such a great great bike at such a great price, and so I still think it'll sell like hotcakes. And it's also worth adding that for a little bit of a step up in price, you can get the SP version, and that gets you trick suspension and a fancy paint job, and that one inherits all of these tweaks for the new model year as well. Now that all said, there's another potential bargain that's on the horizon, and that's the CB1000 Hornet that Honda announced a few weeks back at EICMA. Thing is, they already have a 1000cc inline 4-powered naked in their lineup in the form of the CB1000R, but this Hornet version looks a little bit different in its approach. So while there's still a Fireblade derived engine at the heart of it, the chassis looks a little bit simpler and it uses more basic materials and also some frugal design choices like the omission of the single-sided swing arm. And so what I reckon this is going to be is very similar to Ride, but realistically coming in at a much more affordable price point than the CB1000R. Now full details are TBC, including the price, but I think around the £11,000 mark would make it look really tempting and right in line with the competition like the Suzuki GSX S1000. Next up, alongside the MT-09, this is one of my perennial naked recommendations, and this is the 990 Duke from KTM. Well, previously it was the 890 Duke, but this new version gets some extra capacity, hence the name change, and also that leads to 4 horses more peak power. Elsewhere, you've got tweaks to the chassis, the electronics, and the styling, although it is roughly overall the same winning formula that we've seen for the past few years, just sharpened up a little, and I think that's a good thing. The only downside, or maybe two, would be the price, which has gone up quite a bit since last year, but also maybe that divisive headlight design, which I know from the comments isn't necessarily for everybody. Still, the middleweight Dukes are usually absolutely spectacular to ride, and so I'd fully expect it to sell regardless. If you fancy something a little more aesthetically minded though, then there's always the new 30th anniversary edition of the Ducati Monster. This is basically the peak spec of the current Monster, with the 111 horsepower V-twin, Olin suspension, top spec Brembo brakes, and a Terminioni carbon tipped silencer. Plus, to top it all off, you've got the special Italiano paint job to celebrate 30 years of the Monster, and the gold wheels as a nice finishing touch. 16 grand is admittedly a lot of money for a Monster, but this one does look very special. Rounding off a bunch of updates for the KTM Naked lineup, we've got a new version of the 1290 Super Duke, and this time round it's called the 1390. Now power goes up by about 10 horses, so it's now 190 horsepower at 10,000 RPM, so that's pretty crazy power levels for a V-twin, and the rest of the spec looks up to the job. You've got that in-house WP suspension, Brembo Stylema brakes, and some new Michelin powered GP tyres which shed over a kilogram versus the previous generation. Price-wise, well, it comes in at £17,999 for the R model, or you can pay another 1,600 quid for the Evo, which gets their super advanced semi-active electronic suspension. So look, definitely on the premium end, but it has to be said it does look like a heck of a bike. Still, nothing compares to number 12 on this list, and that's the new Norton V4 CR588 at £49,999. This model has been specifically built to celebrate 125 years of Norton, with the 588 paint job harking back to the rotary racers of the 80s and 90s. Really nice looking, but if you want to know more about the bike that lies beneath it, then I'll put my full rundown of the V4 CR on the screen now so you can give it a click and give it a watch. Do let me know in the comments below as well which bike you'd pick from this list. Hit subscribe if you've not already if you want to see more of the latest motorcycle news like this. A huge thanks for watching today, and we'll catch you in the next one.